This 4-year-old homeless girl sees a millionaire sinking in quicksand. She throws him a rope to pull him out, but she trips, falls in, and something terrible happens. The sun beat down on the cobblestone streets of Springfield that March afternoon, creating heat waves that shimmered, distorting the view over the cracked asphalt. Lily Spencer walked barefoot down Elm Street, her small, calloused feet already accustomed to the rough texture of the stones. At 4 years old, she had learned that coins appeared more easily when people left the city market carrying heavy bags and a smile on their faces. The girl held tightly to a cracked yellow plastic cup she had found in the trash the week before. Her disheveled brown hair fell over her large, expressive eyes that seemed to hold too many secrets for someone so small. The faded pink dress she wore was 3 sizes too big, a gift from a kind old lady who frequented the church on the corner. "Ma'am, a little change for Lily to eat?" Her thin voice echoed among the hurried passers-by, some averting their gaze in embarrassment, others briefly stopping to drop a few coins into her cup. Lily had learned that calling women ma'am and men sir increased her chances of receiving help. She was a smart child, forced by circumstances to develop an early wit for survival. The city market buzzed with the typical Thursday afternoon hustle. Homemakers picked out the best tomatoes, vendors shouted out seasonal fruit specials, and the aroma of spices mingled with the smell of fresh fish and ground meat. Lily knew this environment well. She knew that near the fishmongers, people were often more generous, that at the fruit stand she sometimes got a bruised banana, and that near the exit, the security guards would kick her out if she stayed too long in one place. That day, something different caught her attention. A tall, well-dressed man walked nervously along the sidewalk, repeatedly glancing at a paper in his hands and then at house numbers. He wore a well-tailored grey suit, polished leather shoes, and carried an executive briefcase. His graying hair was slicked back, and even from a distance it was clear he didn't belong in that simple downtown Springfield neighborhood. Arthur Caldwell stopped every few feet, consulted the address written on his paper, and sighed in irritation. At 52, he was accustomed to having control over his situations, but at that moment he felt lost. His construction company had acquired a plot of land downtown for a new residential project, but the address on the documents didn't match the reality he saw before him. "Excuse me, sir." The childish voice made him stop abruptly. Lily stood beside him, looking up with curiosity. "Are you lost?" Arthur lowered his eyes to meet the small, dirty girl who watched him with disconcerting maturity. For a moment he was speechless. He wasn't accustomed to being approached by street children, and his first reaction was discomfort. I'm looking for a plot of land." He showed her the paper with hesitation. "It's supposed to be on this street, but I can't find the correct number." Lily approached, and even without knowing how to read, she observed the paper carefully. "Are you looking for that place over there, mister?" She pointed to an area further down, where there was a lot surrounded by old wooden construction fences. "Nobody goes there. They say there's a dangerous hole." The girl's observation piqued Arthur's curiosity. He put the paper in his jacket's inner pocket and began walking in the direction she had indicated. Lily followed at a respectful distance, her childlike curiosity stronger than her shyness. The lot in question occupied almost an entire block. The fences were deteriorated, with several boards missing, allowing a partial view of the interior. Arthur found an improvised gate, merely leaned against the opening and pushed it open to enter. What he saw left him bewildered. Where there should have been a flat, clear lot ready for construction, there was absolute chaos. Mounds of sand and gravel were haphazardly scattered, rusty machinery abandoned in random corners, and in the center of the lot, a deep, irregular excavation that seemed to have been left in the middle of the work. "What on earth happened here?" Arthur muttered to himself, walking carefully between the obstacles. Lily had slipped through an opening in the fence and watched him from a distance, fascinated by the elegant man's reaction. As Arthur approached the central excavation, he realized the situation was worse than he'd imagined. The rains of recent weeks had transformed the hole into a pit of mud and quicksand. Dirty, oily water reflected the cloudy sky, and the smell of damp earth and decaying material was unbearable. He took his cell phone from his pocket, trying to call his office, but there was no signal in that downtown area. He took a few steps back, looking for a better position, when he felt the ground give way beneath his feet. What seemed like solid ground was, in fact, a thin crust over more quicksand. Arthur tried to regain his balance, but it was too late. His leather shoes slipped on the treacherous surface, and he began to sink slowly. Panic seized him as he realized that the more he struggled, the faster he sank. The thick mud had already swallowed his legs up to his knees and continued rising inexorably. "Help!" he cried, his voice echoing emptily between the fence walls. "Somebody, help me!" Lily, who had watched everything hidden behind a pile of bricks, ran towards the man. Her survival instincts had taught her to recognize danger, but also not to abandon someone in need. On the streets, people sometimes helped her, and she had learned that helping others was also important. "Mister! Mister!" she cried, looking for something she could use to help him. Her small eyes quickly scanned the lot until they found an old worn rope tied to one of the abandoned machines. Without thinking twice, she began to pull it with all the strength her small hands allowed. The rope was stuck, but Lily didn't give up. She climbed onto the machine, used her feet to push off, and finally managed to free it. It was too heavy for her, but she still began to drag it towards Arthur, who continued sinking and screaming for help. "Hold on, mister!" Lily tried to throw the end of the rope towards him, but the distance was too great and her strength too small. Determined to help, she moved closer to the edge of the mud trap. "No, girl, stay back!" Arthur screamed when he saw Lily approaching the unstable area dangerously, but it was too late. The ground also gave way beneath the girl's small feet, and she fell into the same viscous trap that was swallowing the businessman. The cold, sticky mud quickly rose up Lily's slender body. She tried to scream, but fear had taken her voice. Arthur, even in desperation, stretched out his arms towards the child, trying to reach her, as both continued slowly sinking into the treacherous quicksand that could become a grave for both of them that terrible afternoon in Springfield. Desperation overcame Arthur when he saw Lily sinking beside him in the viscous mud. The girl struggled to stay afloat, but her thin little arms could barely move against the density of the material that was slowly swallowing them. Arthur momentarily forgot his own danger and tried to stretch to reach her, but the distance between them was almost 2 yards. "Calm down, sweetheart. Don't struggle," Arthur yelled, vaguely remembering some information about quicksand he had read years ago. "The more you move, the faster you'll sink." Lily stopped struggling for an instant, her big eyes fixed on the man who was trying to help her even while in the same desperate situation. The mud had risen to her waist, completely staining the little pink dress that was one of her few possessions. Outside the lot, Eleanor Grant walked slowly along the sidewalk, returning from her morning walk downtown. At 61, the retired nurse maintained the habit of walking every day, a routine she had adopted after retiring from St. Jude's Hospital, where she worked for 35 years. Her grey hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she wore a floral blue dress and comfortable walking shoes. Eleanor always paid attention to the sounds around her during her walks. It was a professional habit she had never lost. Years working in the emergency room had taught her to identify cries for help, even amidst urban noise. When she heard desperate shouts coming from the fenced-off lot, she stopped immediately. "Help! There's a child here!" Arthur's voice echoed muffled between the fences. Eleanor approached one of the openings in the fence and peeked inside. What she saw horrified her. 2 people were trapped in something. that looked like quicksand in the center of the abandoned lot. Without wasting time, Eleanor took her cell phone from her pocket and dialed the fire department. Her voice was calm and precise, trained by decades of medical emergencies. "Fire department? This is Eleanor Grant, retired nurse. I have an emergency on Elm Street near number 247. 2 people trapped in quicksand. One of them is a small child. They need to come immediately." While giving the information to the operator, Eleanor looked for a way to enter the lot. She found the improvised gate that Arthur had used and entered carefully, assessing the situation with experienced eyes. "Stay calm," she yelled to Arthur and Lily. "The firefighters are coming. Don't move too much. I'll try to find something to help you." Arthur felt a momentary relief, knowing that help was on the way. But looking at Lily, he realized that the girl's situation was more critical than his own. She was much smaller and lighter, which meant she was sinking faster. The mud had already risen to the child's chest. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Arthur asked, trying to keep her calm and conscious. "Lily," she answered in a weak voice, clearly scared but trying to be brave. "Mister, are we going to die?" "No, Lily. That lady over there is calling for help and we'll be out of here soon." Arthur tried to sound confident, but internally he was terrified. The mud had risen to his waist, and he could feel the pressure increasing around his legs. Eleanor ran through the lot, looking for materials that could serve as aid in the rescue. She found some scattered wooden planks and began dragging them towards the mud pit, creating a kind of improvised platform at the edge of the safe area. The sound of fire truck sirens echoed through the streets of Springfield. In a small town like that, emergencies of this type were rare, and the fire department team responded quickly to the call. 3 vehicles arrived at the scene in less than 10 minutes, with specialized equipment for rescue in difficult-to-access locations. Sergeant Mike Davis was the first to enter the lot, followed by his team. At 42, he had coordinated several rescues in complicated situations, but that scene impressed him. A well-dressed middle-aged man and a small child were trapped in the same mud and sand trap. "Mrs. Grant, were you the one who made the call?" The sergeant recognized the retired nurse, who had already collaborated with the firefighters in other emergencies in the city. "Yes, Sergeant. I found them like this when I was walking by. The girl's situation is more critical. She's sinking faster." Mike quickly assessed the situation and began coordinating the rescue. His team set up a system of ropes and pulleys, anchored to one of the abandoned machines that seemed well fixed to the ground. Officer Ryan Green, a specialist in water rescues, put on special gear and prepared to enter the muddy area. "Sir, what's your name?" Mike yelled to Arthur as his team prepared. "Arthur Caldwell. I own Caldwell Construction. I came to check this land I bought, but I didn't know it was in these conditions." "And the girl?" "Lily. She tried to help me and ended up falling in too." Arthur looked at the child with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. "She's very brave." The rescue lasted almost 2 hours. First, they managed to pull out Lily, who was in shock but conscious. Eleanor immediately wrapped her in a blanket and checked her vital signs, reassuring her with sweet words while waiting for the ambulance. Arthur was pulled out next, exhausted and covered in mud, but without serious injuries. In the ambulance on the way to the hospital, Arthur couldn't stop thinking about the girl's courage. She had risked her own life to try to save him without even knowing him. As the paramedics checked his vital signs, he watched Lily lying on the stretcher beside him, her big eyes still scared, but already regaining some color in her face. "Where are you from, Lily?" Arthur asked gently. "I live on the street," she answered simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Before, I lived somewhere with other kids, but it was bad there." Eleanor, who accompanied the 2 victims in the ambulance, frowned. "A shelter?" Lily nodded. "They were really mean. Ms. Olson used to hit us when we made a mess, so I ran away." The revelation deeply impacted Arthur. This small, brave girl not only lived on the streets, but had also fled mistreatment at an institution that should have protected her. Throughout his life, he had been focused on his work and his business, rarely stopping to think about the social reality that existed right before his eyes. At the hospital, while waiting for test results, Arthur called his wife. "Catherine, it's me. I'm at the hospital, but don't worry, I'm fine. Something happened today. A girl saved my life." Catherine Caldwell was at home, immersed in the melancholy routine that had become her life for the past 3 years. At 49, she had become a shadow of her former self. Her brown hair, once always well-groomed, was now tied in a simple ponytail most of the time. She wore comfortable drab clothes, as if she'd lost interest in her appearance. "What girl, Arthur? What happened?" Catherine's voice carried the emotional exhaustion that constantly accompanied her. "It's a long story. I'll be home soon and tell you everything. But Catherine, she has nowhere to go. She's a street kid." Catherine closed her eyes. Ever since they lost Ethan in a car accident 3 years ago, any mention of children brought a deep ache to her chest. Her 8-year-old son had been her whole world, and when he was gone, she fell into a depression from which she hadn't yet fully recovered. "Arthur, you know I can't. Not with kids." "I know, sweetheart. But this girl, she risked her life to try and save me. I can't just abandon her." After hanging up, Arthur watched Lily, who was being examined by the doctors. The girl answered questions with impressive maturity for her 4 years, but he could see the fear in her eyes whenever someone approached too quickly or spoke in a louder tone. Dr. Ben Peterson, the hospital pediatrician, finished the exam and approached Arthur. "Physically, she's fine. Just a few scratches and the scare. But I need to warn you that I identified signs of chronic malnutrition and some old marks that could indicate abuse." "What happens with her now?" Arthur asked. "Normally, we'd have to contact Child Protective Services and return her to the shelter she ran away from. But if she really fled due to mistreatment..." Arthur made a decision that would change his life forever. "Doctor, I'd like to take temporary responsibility for her, at least until we can properly resolve the situation." Dr. Peterson studied him for a moment. "Are you sure?" "It's a big responsibility, especially considering her traumatic history." "I'm sure. This girl saved my life today. It's the least I can do." When Lily learned she was going to Arthur's house, her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of a relief she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in months, she might have a safe place to sleep, far from the cold of the streets and the constant fear. The Caldwell's house was in Northwood Estates, one of Springfield's most upscale areas. It was a spacious ranch home, with a well-maintained front yard and tall fences that ensured privacy. Arthur drove slowly through the tree-lined streets, watching Lily in the rearview mirror too, small for the seatbelt in the back seat, staring out the window with fascination at the large houses and luxury cars parked in the driveways. "Lily, we're here," Arthur said softly, pulling into the garage. The girl had fallen asleep during the ride from the hospital, exhausted by the day's events, and woke up disoriented. "Mister, is this your house?" she asked, her big eyes wide as she saw the size of the property. "It's our house now," Arthur replied, surprising himself with his own words. "At least for now." Catherine was waiting at the kitchen door, nervous and visibly uncomfortable. She had spent the last 2 hours trying to psychologically prepare for a child's arrival in her home. She had put away all the photos of Ethan that used to be displayed in the living room, a task that left her emotionally exhausted. When she saw Lily get out of the car, Catherine felt her chest tighten. The girl was small and thin, with messy hair and dirty clothes, but there was something in her eyes that painfully reminded her of Ethan, a mixture of innocence and intelligence that broke her heart. "Hi, ma'am," Lily said shyly, partially hiding behind Arthur. Her experience on the streets had taught her to read people's expressions, and she could sense that the woman in front of her was sad and didn't seem happy to see her. "Hello," Catherine replied, her voice coming out colder than she intended. "You must be hungry." Lily's reaction was immediate and telling. Her eyes lit up with a hope that broke both adults' hearts. "Can I eat?" "Of course you can," Arthur said quickly, noticing the emotion on his wife's face. "Let's go inside and see what's in the kitchen." The interior of the house impressed Lily even more than the exterior. The marble floor gleamed, the furniture was large and elegant, and there were paintings on the walls showing beautiful landscapes. For a child who had spent the last few months sleeping on cardboard on the streets, it seemed like a palace. In the kitchen, Catherine prepared a simple ham and cheese sandwich, observing how Lily ate with a voraciousness that revealed days of hunger. The girl held the sandwich with both small hands, as if afraid someone would take it from her. "Slow down, sweetheart," Arthur said gently. "No one's going to take your food. You can eat as much as you want." Lily stopped chewing and looked at him in disbelief. "Really?" "Really?" Catherine replied, her voice softer this time. Despite all the suffering the girl's presence stirred within her, she couldn't remain insensitive to the child's obvious vulnerability. After eating, Lily timidly explored the house, always asking permission before touching anything. When they reached the guest room where she would sleep, the girl stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at the bed with clean sheets and soft pillows. "Is this room mine?" she asked, disbelief clear in her voice. "It is," Arthur confirmed. "Just yours, and tomorrow Catherine will help you take a bath and get you some clean clothes." That night, Catherine barely slept. Through the wall, she could hear Lily tossing and turning in bed, clearly unaccustomed to the comfort of a soft mattress. Around 3 in the morning, she heard small footsteps in the hallway and knew the girl had gotten up. Catherine found Lily in the kitchen, standing in front of the open refrigerator, looking at the food as if she couldn't believe the quantity available. "Are you hungry again?" Catherine asked softly, trying not to scare the girl. Lily turned quickly, guilt stamped on her face. "Sorry, ma'am, I just wanted to see if there was still food." "There will always be food here, Lily. You don't have to worry about that ever again." For the first time since her arrival, Lily smiled, a small, hesitant but genuine smile. "Thank you, Miss Catherine." In the following days, a strange routine had settled into the Caldwell household. Arthur left for work every morning, leaving Catherine alone with Lily. Initially, the two maintained a respectful distance, but gradually they began to interact more. Lily proved to be an exceptionally intelligent and observant child. She quickly learned the rules of the house, never made a mess, and always asked permission before doing anything. Her education came from the streets, where she had learned that causing trouble could mean losing someone's protection. Catherine, in turn, began to notice small things about Lily that deeply touched her. The girl constantly drew small drawings of houses with smiling families made with pencils found around the house. She hummed children's songs she had learned at the shelter, always in a low voice, as if afraid of disturbing anyone. A week after Lily's arrival, Thomas Miller came for dinner at the Caldwells. The 45-year-old lawyer had been a family friend for over a decade and had helped Arthur legally structure his construction company. Tall and slender, with dark hair and intelligent eyes behind glasses, Thomas was known in Springfield for his honesty and professional competence. "Arthur, you need to formalize the girl's situation," Thomas said during dinner, lowering his voice so Lily, who was playing in the living room, wouldn't hear. "From a legal standpoint, she's still the state's responsibility." "I know, Thomas, but what if they want to take her back to the shelter she ran away from? You mentioned she suffered mistreatment there. With the medical reports from the hospital and a proper investigation, it might be possible to transfer her to another institution or even start a temporary guardianship process." Catherine, who had remained silent during the conversation, finally spoke up. "What if we applied for permanent guardianship?" Both men looked at her in surprise. It was the first time in a week that Catherine had shown any interest in formalizing Lily's presence in the house. "Catherine, are you sure?" Arthur asked carefully. "I know it's been difficult for you." "It has," she admitted. "But this girl, she's changing something in me. For the first time in 3 years, I woke up this morning and didn't immediately think of Ethan." The confession deeply moved Arthur. He knew how much Catherine had suffered from the loss of their son, and seeing a spark of hope in her eyes was something that hadn't happened in a long time. "The process would be long and complex," Thomas explained, "especially considering you have no prior experience with adoption, but given the special circumstances of the case." At that moment, Lily appeared at the dining room door, holding a drawing in her small hands. "Mr. Thomas, can I show you my drawing?" The lawyer was surprised by the girl's politeness and maturity. "Of course, Lily. Let's see." The drawing showed a simple house with 3 figures in front, a tall man, a woman, and a small child. They were all holding hands and smiling. At the top of the page, in childlike yet careful handwriting, was written, "My family." "That's beautiful, Lily," Thomas said, genuinely touched. "Did you draw it all by yourself?" "Yes, I did. I learned to write a little at the shelter before I ran away." After Lily went back to the living room, Thomas looked at the couple with a serious expression. "Do you realize what this girl represents? She's not just a child who needs help. She's a child who has already chosen you as her family." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Arthur and Catherine talked late into the night about the future. It was the first truly deep conversation they'd had in years, and both realized that Lily had brought a new energy into their marriage. "Arthur, there's something I need to tell you," Catherine said, her voice heavy with emotion. "This morning, while you were at work, Lily had a nightmare. She woke up screaming and crying, talking about a Miss Olsen who used to hit her." "My God," Arthur murmured, feeling anger swell in his chest. "But when I comforted her, when I held her until she stopped crying, Arthur, for the first time since we lost Ethan, I felt I had a purpose again. I felt I could be a mother again." The revelation made Arthur make a decision that would change everything. "Then let's formalize everything. We'll officially adopt Lily. Are you sure?" "Absolutely. This girl saved my life, Catherine, and now she's saving ours." What neither of them knew was that the next day, while Lily was playing in the backyard, she would find something buried under Catherine's rosebush that would change not only their lives, but the entire story they thought they knew about the land where they almost lost their lives. Saturday morning dawned sunny in Springfield, and Lily woke up earlier than usual. During the 2 weeks she had been at the Caldwell's house, she had developed the habit of exploring the backyard right after breakfast, always careful not to touch anything without permission. The garden was a new world for her. Colorful flowers, soft grass, and fruit trees that contrasted dramatically with the cold concrete of the streets where she had lived. That morning, while Catherine prepared breakfast and Arthur read the newspaper on the porch, Lily went to the corner of the yard where Catherine's rosebush was. The red roses were blooming, and the girl liked to smell the delicate perfume of the flowers, always being careful not to prick herself on thorns, crouching near the roots of the rosebush. Lily noticed something strange. The earth around the plant looked different, softer and darker than the rest of the garden, as if it had been recently disturbed. Her childlike curiosity, sharpened by months of street survival, led her to start digging with her small hands. A few inches below the surface, her fingers touched something that wasn't dirt. It was plastic, smooth and resistant. Lily dug a little more and managed to pull out a package wrapped in several layers of transparent plastic, tied with string, and surprisingly well preserved. "Miss Catherine!" Lily cried, running to the kitchen with the dirt-covered package in her hands. "I found something buried in the garden." Catherine turned from the stove, where she was frying eggs, and was surprised to see a dirty Lily holding a strange bundle. "What is that, Lily? Where did you find it?" "It was buried under the rose bush. Can you open it, ma'am?" Arthur, hearing the conversation from the porch, entered the kitchen, intrigued by the discovery. He took the package from Lily's hands and examined it carefully. It was heavy and seemed to contain papers. "It must have been the house's previous owner who buried this," Catherine suggested. "We bought this house 5 years ago from an elderly gentleman who moved to Fairview." Arthur carefully cut the string and opened the plastic layers. Inside was a brown leather briefcase, a bit dried out by time, but in good condition. When he opened the briefcase, he found a collection of documents that left him completely bewildered. "Catherine, come see this," he called, his voice filled with disbelief. The first document was an old deed, dated 1987, referring to a plot of land downtown Springfield. The owner's name was clearly printed, Rodriguez, Joseph Joe Rodriguez. Just below, in careful handwriting, was a handwritten note. "For my daughter Elena and my granddaughter Lily Marie Rodriguez." "Lily Spencer," Catherine murmured, looking at the girl playing with the dirt still clinging to her hands. "Lily, what's your full name?" "Lily Marie Rodriguez," the girl replied naturally. "Why, ma'am?" Arthur and Catherine exchanged glances, a shocking realization beginning to form. Arthur continued examining the documents, finding birth certificates, tax payment receipts, and a set of papers documenting the forced sale of the land in 2018. "This can't be a coincidence," Arthur said, his voice low but tense. "The land where we met, the land my company bought." One of the documents was a letter, written in shaky handwriting, apparently by someone elderly or ill. Arthur read aloud, "To whoever finds these papers, my name is Joseph Rodriguez, and I am dying of lung cancer. My daughter Elena works in Portland, and my little granddaughter Lily is in a shelter here in Springfield because Elena can't afford to take care of her right now. They are trying to force me to sell my land downtown for much less than it's worth. The city councilman Victor Price is threatening me, saying that if I don't sell, he'll invent problems with the paperwork. I'm hiding these papers so that one day my family can prove that the land is rightfully ours." The letter was dated March 2018, just 2 months before Arthur's construction company purchased the land. Lily, sensing the tension in the atmosphere, timidly approached. "Mr. Arthur, why are you sad? Did I do something wrong?" Arthur knelt down to the girl's level, gently holding her small shoulders. "No, Lily, you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you might have discovered something very important." "What did I discover?" Catherine joined them, her hands trembling slightly. "Lily, do you remember your grandpa, your mum's daddy?" The girl frowned, concentrating to remember. "I remember a little. He was old and coughed a lot. He used to give me honey candies." "What was his name?" "Grandpa Joe. He had a small house and said that one day it would be mine." Arthur closed his eyes, processing the magnitude of what they had discovered. The girl who had tried to save him on the abandoned lot was, in fact, the legitimate owner of that land. His company had unwittingly participated in a fraudulent transaction that had stolen the inheritance of the child who now lived in his home. "Arthur, what are we going to do?" Catherine asked, clearly rattled by the revelation. Before he could answer, the house phone rang. Arthur answered, still in shock from the discoveries. "Mark, it's me. There's a serious problem with the Elm Street property." Mark Anderson was the engineer responsible for the new condominium project that was to be built on the property. Arthur had worked with him for over 10 years and completely trusted his technical competence. "What kind of problem, Mark?" "The City Hall is questioning the property's documentation. They, Say there might be irregularities in the transfer of ownership. They're asking for a complete audit of all the papers. Arthur sank heavily into the kitchen chair. Mark, cancel all activities related to that property. I don't want anything else touched there until further notice. Arthur, that's going to mean a loss of almost $200,000 just in rented equipment and hired labor. I know, but cancel everything anyway. After hanging up, Arthur looked at the documents spread on the kitchen table. His company had bought the land in good faith, paying the requested amount and following all seemingly correct legal procedures. But now he knew that behind this transaction was a web of corruption that had victimized an entire family. Catherine, I need to call Thomas immediately. Are you going to tell him everything? I am. And I'm going to return the land to Lily, even if it means the ruin of the construction company. Lily, who had overheard part of the conversation without fully understanding its meaning, approached Arthur again. Mister, are you mad at me because of the papers I found? Arthur picked her up, something he had begun to do naturally in recent weeks. I'm not mad at you, little one. I'm mad at some bad people who did wrong things. But you might have helped us fix those wrong things. How? Remember I told you that sometimes adults do bad things to other people? Well, some bad people took something that belonged to your grandpa without permission. But now, with these papers you found, we can get justice. Catherine observed the interaction between Arthur and Lily, realizing how the girl had naturally become a part of their lives. The discovery of the documents had changed everything, but one thing remained clear. Lily needed protection and love, regardless of legal issues about land. Arthur, even if this complicates everything for the construction company, we did the right thing by bringing Lily home. No doubt about it, and we'll continue to do the right thing. At that moment, neither of them imagined that the discovery of the documents was just the beginning of a much more complex web of corruption that would involve people they considered friends, threaten the financial stability they had built over decades, and put the entire family in a dangerous situation that would test the limits of the love they had developed for Lily. The phone rang again, interrupting his thoughts. This time it was Thomas. Arthur, I need to see you urgently. Some questions have arisen about the Elm Street property you bought. Very serious questions. Thomas Miller's office was in downtown Springfield, in an old but well-maintained building on Main Street. Arthur arrived still shaken by the discovery of the documents, carrying the leather briefcase Lily had found. The lawyer waited for him with a grave expression that immediately put Arthur on alert. Thomas, before you tell me what you found, I need to show you something that might change everything, Arthur said, placing the briefcase on the office desk. Arthur, can this wait? Because what I have to tell you is very serious. Actually, it might be directly related. Lily found these documents buried in our backyard this morning. Thomas frowned, intrigued. He had known Arthur long enough to know he wasn't prone to exaggerations or conspiracy theories. When his friend opened the briefcase and showed him the documents, the lawyer was visibly shaken. Joseph Rodriguez, that name came up in my investigation, Thomas said, carefully examining the deeds. Arthur, do you have any idea what this means? That my company bought land that was illegally sold, stolen from a family. Not just that. It means you might be being used as a pawn in a much larger scheme of money laundering and misappropriation of public land. Arthur felt his stomach churn. What do you mean? Thomas got up and went to a filing cabinet, from which he took a folder full of documents. I've spent the last 2 days investigating the documentation for the property you bought. I found at least 6 other properties in downtown Springfield that were sold under the same suspicious circumstances in the last 3 years. 6 others. All belonged to low-income families or seniors who were pressured to sell for prices far below market value. All transactions went through the same city councilman, Victor Price. Arthur remembered the name mentioned in Joseph's letter. Victor was the one who approved my property's documentation. Exactly. And there's more. 3 of those properties were resold to shell companies registered in other states for 5 times the original price. Then, these shell companies sold the land to local construction companies at normal market prices. Are you saying someone is using small construction companies like mine to legitimize stolen land? That's exactly what I'm saying. And Arthur, your construction company might be a target of a federal investigation into money laundering. Arthur abruptly stood up, walking to the office window. Below, the normal hustle and bustle of downtown Springfield continued, people shopping and living their lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the law office. Thomas, I bought that land in good faith. I didn't know anything about this. I believe you, Arthur, but that won't be enough if the federal agents decide to investigate. You need to get ahead, cooperate with the investigation before. It looks like you're trying to hide something. And Lily, what happens to her in all this? Technically, if we can prove the land was sold illegally, she's entitled to restitution of the property. But that doesn't solve her problem now. She's still a child with no known family, living with us informally. Thomas sat down again, organizing the papers on the desk. Arthur, I need to ask you a difficult question. Are you sure you want to get involved in all this? Fighting this corruption scheme could destroy your company, your reputation, and still not solve Lily's family problems. Thomas's question echoed in the silent office. Arthur knew he was at a crossroads that would define not only his financial future, but also the kind of man he chose to be. He thought of Lily, playing innocently in the backyard that morning, unaware that she had discovered evidence that could dismantle a web of corruption. Thomas, this girl saved my life, literally. If she hadn't tried to help me on that lot, I would have drowned alone in the quicksand, and probably no one would have found me in time. Arthur, let me finish. Catherine had been sinking into depression for 3 years. Since Lily came into our home, my wife smiles again, talks about future plans, started taking care of herself again. This child not only saved my physical life, she saved my family. So you're going to face this? I am, but not alone. I need your help to do this the right way. Thomas nodded, a small smile appearing on his face. I was waiting for you to say that. I've already started structuring a legal strategy. First, we'll formalize Lily's situation. Second, we'll voluntarily present ourselves to the authorities with all the documentation we have. And third, we'll find Elena Rodriguez. If she really is Lily's mother, she needs to know what's happening. That afternoon, back at home, Arthur found a scene that filled him with joy and sadness simultaneously. Catherine was in the backyard with Lily, teaching the girl to plant flower seedlings in small pots. The two chatted animatedly, and Lily laughed at the stories Catherine told her about taking care of plants. Miss Catherine, when the flowers grow, will they be mine? Lily asked, her small hands carefully placing soil around a petunia seedling. Yes, they will, my dear, and when they grow, you can give them as gifts to whoever you want. Then I'll give one to Mr. Arthur, one to you, and one to Mom when she comes to pick me up. Catherine stopped digging in the dirt, looking at Lily in surprise. Do you think your Mom will come pick you up? I don't know, but Grandpa Joe always said Mom worked far away to earn money and that one day she would come back for me. Lily's innocence broke Catherine's heart. The girl still hoped to reunite with her mother, even after everything she had been through. It was a hope Catherine didn't have the courage to nurture or destroy. Lily, even if your mom comes one day, you'll always have a place in our home, okay? Okay, Miss Catherine. You're my family now. Arthur watched the scene from the kitchen door, deciding not to interrupt. When Catherine finally came in to prepare dinner, he followed her. How was it at Thomas's office? She asked, washing her hands at the sink. Complicated. Very complicated. It seems we've gotten involved in something much bigger than we imagined. Arthur told Catherine everything he had discovered about the corruption scheme, his company's precarious legal situation, and the need to find Elena Rodriguez. Catherine listened in silence, methodically drying her hands with a towel. "Arthur, are you sure you want to face all this? We can simply return the land, absorb the company's losses, and try to live our lives in peace." "I can't do that, Catherine. Not after knowing that other families have been harmed in the same way. And especially, I can't do that to Lily. She deserves justice. And if it means we lose everything, the company, this house, our stability..." Arthur looked out the kitchen window where Lily carefully watered the pots she had planted with Catherine. "Then we start over, but at least we start knowing we did the right thing." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Catherine made a discovery that would change everything once again. She was organizing the girls' clothes when she found, in the pocket of one of the dresses, a small, crumpled piece of paper with a phone number and a name. Elena, Portland. When she showed the paper to Arthur, he realized that Lily had kept that information since before she arrived at their house. The girl knew how to contact her mother, but for some reason she had never mentioned it. "Why do you think she didn't talk about it?" Catherine asked. "Maybe because she's afraid we'll send her away if we know she has family. Or maybe because she tried to call before and couldn't reach her mom." Arthur held the paper, looking at the numbers written in careful adult handwriting. The next morning, his life would change again when he made that call and discovered that Elena Rodriguez had been desperately looking for Lily for over 2 years. The call to Portland was made at 8 in the morning on Sunday, while Lily was still sleeping in the guest room. Arthur dialed the number found on the crumpled paper, his hands trembling slightly. Catherine was beside him in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold as she watched her husband gather the courage to make the call. The phone rang 4 times before a feminine voice answered, sounding tired and suspicious. "Hello? Good morning. I'd like to speak with Elena Rodriguez." "Who's calling?" "My name is Arthur Caldwell. I'm calling from Springfield about Lily Marie Rodriguez." The silence on the other end of the line was so long that Arthur thought the call had dropped. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was filled with emotion and desperation. "You found my daughter? Please, tell me you found my daughter." The urgency in Elena's voice immediately confirmed Arthur's suspicions. "Elena, yes, we found Lily. She's fine, she's safe with us." The sound of crying on the other end of the line was audible. Elena sobbed uncontrollably for a few moments before she could speak again. "Is she okay? Is she hurt? Where did you find her?" "She's healthy and safe, but I need to tell you how we met her, and there are some complicated things we've discovered about her situation." Arthur told the whole story. The accident at the lot, the rescue, the decision to temporarily take Lily home, and the discovery of the documents buried in the backyard. Eleanor listened in silence, interrupting only to ask specific questions about her daughter's well-being. "Mr. Caldwell, I work as a cleaner at Evangelical Hospital here in Portland. I work 3 shifts a week and weekends when called. I've been saving money for 2 years to hire a lawyer to help me find Lily." "Why did you need a lawyer?" "Because when my father got sick and I came to Portland to work, I temporarily left Lily at the shelter in Springfield. They said it was just until I could get settled and afford to take care of her here. But when I went back to pick her up 6 months later, they said she had run away and they didn't know where she was." Catherine, who was listening to the conversation, felt her chest tighten. The story Eleanor was telling was completely different from the version they had imagined. Lily wasn't an abandoned child. She was a lost child whose biological parents had been desperately looking for her. "Elena, do you have documentation that proves you are Lily's mother?" "I have everything. Birth certificate, vaccination record, baby photos. I keep everything in a folder I carry everywhere. Can you come to Springfield? I think we need to talk in person. I can come today. I have money saved for the ticket. I can take the midday bus and arrive there by 4 in the afternoon. After finalizing the meeting details, Arthur hung up the phone and looked at Catherine, who had tears in her eyes. She's going to take Lily away, Catherine said, her voice almost a whisper. Catherine, no, Arthur. I know it's the right thing to do. Lily has a mother who loves her and has been looking for her for 2 years, but that doesn't make it any less painful for us. Arthur hugged his wife, feeling his own pain mixed with a strange relief. He knew Catherine was right. Reuniting Lily with her biological mother was what should happen. But the last 3 weeks had completely changed their lives, and the house without Lily would seem empty and purposeless. Mr. Arthur, Ms. Catherine? Lily's sleepy voice echoed from the hallway. Can I have breakfast? Yes, you can, my dear, Catherine replied, quickly wiping away tears and forcing a smile. Come here. I'll make special pancakes for you. During breakfast, Lily animatedly talked about her plans for the day. She wanted to water the flowers she had planted, draw more family pictures, and maybe help Catherine bake cookies. Her innocence and joy made it even harder for the couple to think about how to approach the subject of her mother's arrival. Lily, Arthur said carefully, do you remember your mum? The girl stopped eating, looking at him with curiosity. I remember a little. Why are you asking, mister? Because we talked to her this morning. She's coming to Springfield to see you. Lily's reaction was complex and confused. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't seem sad. It was as if multiple emotions were fighting within her: joy, fear, confusion, and hope. Mommy's coming to get me, she asked in a small voice. We don't know yet, Lily. She wants to see you, talk to you. We'll figure out together what's best for everyone. But if she takes me away, I won't live with you anymore. Catherine knelt beside Lily's chair, holding her small hands. My dear, your mommy loves you very much and has been looking for you for a long time. Whatever happens, you'll always be special to us. Lily nodded gravely, processing the information with the forced maturity she had developed during her months on the streets. Can I keep watering my flowers until she gets here? Of course you can. The next few hours passed slowly. Lily played in the backyard with less enthusiasm than usual, often stopping to look towards the gate as if expecting someone to arrive. Catherine tried to maintain a normal routine, but she was visibly nervous, tidying and retidying the house multiple times. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Arthur left to pick up Eleanor at the bus station. During the drive, he tried to imagine what this woman, who had worked so hard to reunite with her daughter, would be like. Eleanor had explained over the phone that she was 38, had brown hair, and would be wearing a floral blue dress. When he saw her getting off the bus, Arthur recognized her immediately. Elena Rodriguez was a small, slender woman with large eyes that very much resembled Lily's. She carried only a small bag and a file of documents, and her movements were anxious and nervous. Mr. Caldwell, she approached hesitantly. Elena, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. During the drive home, Elena recounted more details of her story. She was 17 when Lily was born, the result of a relationship that didn't work out. Her father, Joseph, had helped her raise Lily for the girl's first 2 years, but when he became seriously ill, Elena had to work full-time to pay for his medical treatment. When I left Lily at the shelter, I thought it would only be for a few months. The director assured me she would be safe and well cared for. I sent money every month, called whenever I could. But when I went back to pick her up... What happened when you went back? They said Lily had run away 3 months earlier and that they had notified the police. But when I went to the police station, there was no missing child report under her name. It was as if as if she had simply disappeared from official records. Arthur thought of Councilman Victor Price's name mentioned in Joseph's letter. He began to suspect that Eleanor's difficulty in finding Lily was no coincidence, but the result of the same corruption that had stolen the family's land. When they arrived home, Catherine was waiting at the door with Lily. The girl partially hid behind Catherine, watching the woman get out of the car with curiosity and nervousness. Elena stopped a few yards away, tears streaming freely down her face as she saw the daughter she had been looking for 2 long and desperate years. "Hi, my princess," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Mommy has been looking for you for so long." Lily looked at the woman, trying to reconcile her fragmented memories from being a 2-year-old with the person in front of her. Slowly, she stepped out from behind Catherine and took a few hesitant steps towards Elena. "Are you my real mommy?" Lily asked. "Yes, my child. Your mommy who loves you more than anything in the world." The reunion between mother and daughter was moving and tense at the same time. Elena knelt and opened her arms, but Lily hesitated, looking back at Catherine and Arthur before approaching. When they finally embraced, both cried, Elena out of relief and happiness, Lily out of confusion and emotions she couldn't fully comprehend. But the moment was interrupted by the sound of a car screeching to a halt in front of the house. Councilman Victor Price had arrived, and his presence would change everything again. Councilman Victor Price stepped out of the official city car with a grim expression on his face. At 56, the municipal councilman was a corpulent man with slicked-back grey hair and a prominent belly that strained the buttons of his dress shirt. His small, calculating eyes quickly scanned the scene in front of the Caldwell's house, Elena embracing Lily, Arthur and Catherine watching with tension. "Mr. Caldwell," Victor said, his voice carrying a forced authority that couldn't hide an underlying nervousness. "I need to speak with you urgently." Arthur instinctively placed himself between Victor and his makeshift family. "Victor, we're having a private moment here. Any official business can wait until tomorrow." "Unfortunately, it cannot wait. I've been informed of some irregularities related to the property your company acquired. Irregularities that could have serious legal consequences." Elena, who was still kneeling, hugging Lily, raised her head at the sound of the conversation, her eyes fixed on Victor, and an expression of recognition and anger took over her face. "I know you," she said, her voice full of accusation. "You're the man who was always threatening my father when he got sick." Victor turned to Elena, clearly uncomfortable with the recognition. "Ma'am, I believe you're mistaking me for someone else." "I'm not mistaken. Victor Price, city councilman. You came to my father's house every month saying he had to sell the land or he'd have problems with the paperwork." The revelation created a palpable tension in the air. Arthur immediately realized that Victor's presence there was no coincidence. He knew about the discovery of the documents and had come to try and control the situation. "Victor," Arthur said, his voice firm, "I think you'd better leave. Any conversation we have will be in the presence of my lawyer." "Mr. Caldwell, you don't understand the seriousness of the situation. There are aspects of this transaction that could seriously compromise your company. I'm here to help resolve this amicably." "Help?" Elena stood up, placing Lily behind her. "How did you help my father? By threatening him until he agreed to sell our property for a pittance." Victor nervously looked around, realizing the situation was getting out of his control. "Ma'am, your father sold the property voluntarily. All the documents are in order." "Forged documents!" Elena shouted, her years of pain finally finding an outlet. "My father was dying of cancer, could barely sign his own name, and you took advantage of it." Catherine, realizing the argument was frightening Lily, approached the girl. "Lily, how about we go inside for a snack while the adults talk?" "No, Miss Catherine, Lily said, surprising everyone with her firmness, I want to stay. This man did bad things to Grandpa Joe. Lily's declaration made Victor turn pale. A 4-year-old child had memories of the threats he had made against her grandfather, memories that could be used as testimony. The child is confused, Victor quickly said. Young children mix reality with fantasy. I'm not confused, Lily replied, her voice clear despite being visibly scared. Grandpa Joe cried after you left. He said bad men wanted to steal our house. Arthur realized he was witnessing something much bigger than a simple dispute over real estate documentation. Victor hadn't come there to negotiate. He had come to intimidate and try to silence potential witnesses. Victor, you heard what I said. Get off my property now. Mr. Caldwell, you're making a mistake. There are very important people involved in this situation, people who won't like to know you're causing unnecessary trouble. The veiled threat made Arthur feel a mixture of anger and fear. Is that a threat? It's a friendly piece of advice. You have a prosperous company, a beautiful family. It would be a shame if something happened to jeopardize all that. Eleanor stepped forward, brave despite the visible fear in her eyes. The same threats you made to my father, but this time there are people here to witness it. At that moment, Arthur's cell phone rang. It was Thomas. Arthur, I need you to come to my office immediately. Something serious has happened regarding the investigation. Thomas, I can't leave now. Victor Price is here at my house making threats. Victor is there? Arthur, get away from him now. The federal agents just issued a search and arrest warrant for him. He's being investigated for conspiracy and money laundering. Arthur looked at Victor, who had clearly overheard part of the phone conversation. The councilman's face had lost all color, and he began to retreat towards his car. Victor Price, Arthur said loud enough for Thomas to hear on the phone, you're wanted by the federal agents. Victor stopped retreating, realizing his situation had irreversibly deteriorated. For a moment, it seemed like he considered fleeing, but then his expression changed to one of desperation and rage. You have no idea what you've just done, he said, his voice trembling. Do you think it's just me? Do you think I can be arrested and everything will go back to normal? What are you talking about? Arthur asked, maintaining distance, but trying to keep Victor talking until authorities arrived. Chuck Harrison won't let this go. He has a lot of money invested in this project, and he won't let a child and some old documents destroy years of planning. Eleanor gasped when she heard the name. Chuck Harrison? The businessman who owns the department store chain? The same. Victor laughed bitterly. He's been running this city for over 10 years. Do you think some papers buried in a backyard will bring down an empire built with such care? Arthur realized that Victor was revealing crucial information, probably because he felt cornered and hopeless. How many properties did Charles steal this way? Stole? Victor laughed again. We bought everything legally. It's not our fault if the original owners were too naive to understand the real value of their properties. My father wasn't naive, Elena said angrily. He was sick and scared. Your father was an obstacle to the city's progress. Charles had big plans for that area, plans that would bring jobs and development to Springfield. At the cost of stealing from poor families, Arthur retorted. At that moment, 2 federal agent vehicles arrived at the house, followed by Thomas's car. The agents quickly exited their vehicles, surrounding Victor before he could try to flee. Victor Price, you are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and misappropriation, announced the lead agent, showing the arrest warrant. As Victor was handcuffed, he yelled one last threat. Charles won't forget this. You don't know who you're messing with. Thomas approached Arthur as soon as Victor was placed in the vehicle. Things moved very fast this afternoon. The federal agents had been monitoring Victor's communications for weeks. The call he made to someone after you were in my office yesterday provided the final evidence they needed. Thomas, he mentioned Charles Harrison, said he's the one behind all this. I know. Charles is the next target of the investigation. But Arthur, this means you might be in real danger. Charles has resources and contacts that Victor never had. Eleanor, who had remained silent during the arrest, finally spoke. What does this mean for Lily? For our family? Thomas looked at the girl, who was watching everything with wide, scared eyes, holding tightly to her mother's hand. It means you need protection, and it means Lily could be the most important witness in a case that goes far beyond a simple stolen property. That night, after the federal agents left with Victor and the agents finished collecting testimonies, the family gathered in the Caldwell's living room. Elena had decided to stay a few more days to resolve the legal situation, and Lily slept between her biological mother and Catherine on the living room couch, the three women united by extraordinary circumstances. But across town, Charles Harrison received the news of Victor's arrest and made decisions that would put everyone in much greater danger. Charles Harrison received news of Victor's arrest in his penthouse office overlooking downtown Springfield. At 63, the businessman had built an empire based on department stores, small markets, and real estate properties scattered throughout northern Illinois. His completely white hair was always impeccably groomed, and he wore expensive suits that partially concealed his prominent belly. "Mr. Harrison," said Michael Thompson, his private attorney and trusted confidant for over 15 years, "the situation is spiraling out of control. Victor was arrested based on solid evidence, and he might cut a cooperating witness agreement." Charles turned his executive chair to look out the panoramic window that offered a view of the entire city. Below, streetlights began to illuminate the twilight, and he could see the normal hustle of urban life. People returning from work, families dining in restaurants, young people enjoying themselves in the parks. It was an empire that had taken decades to build, and he would not allow it to be destroyed by a 4-year-old child and some old documents. "Michael, Victor knows too much to stay alive long in prison, but before that happens, he can cause a lot of damage." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we need to accelerate our plans. The downtown project can't wait any longer. We have investors from New York City who have put a lot of money into this venture." Charles was referring to the commercial and residential complex he had planned for the area where Joseph Rodriguez's land was located and other properties acquired through questionable methods. The project would represent a profit of over $50 million and would consolidate his position as the most influential businessman in the region. But Mr. Harrison, with Victor arrested and the documents that were found, the documents can be contested, old paper from a man who was sick and might have fabricated everything before he died. As for the child, Charles paused, his cold eyes calculating possibilities. "The child is a problem that needs to be definitively resolved." "What do you mean?" "The girl is living illegally with a family that has no official guardianship. The mother is an unemployed cleaner from Portland without the resources to properly care for her daughter. There must be some legal way to remove her from the situation." Michael uncomfortably adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Harrison, we're talking about a child. Even if she is a legal complication, we're talking about $50 million, Michael. And much more than that, we're talking about who really runs this city." In the Caldwell's home, the night had been tense, despite the apparent calm. Eleanor had put Lily to sleep in the guest room and was now talking with Arthur and Catherine in the kitchen about the next steps. The presence of Lily's biological mother had created a complex dynamic in the house. Everyone wanted the best for the girl, but it wasn't clear what the best solution would be. "Eleanor," Catherine said carefully, "I need to ask you something. Do you really have the means to care for Lily now? I mean financially and structurally." "I work 3 shifts a week at the hospital. I earn 1.5 times minimum wage," Elena replied honestly. I live in a rented room in a boarding house in Portland. It's not ideal, but it's what I've managed. And your plan is to take Lily to live with you under those conditions? Elena lowered her eyes, clearly struggling with her own doubts. I waited so long to find her that I didn't think clearly about what I'd do next. I just wanted my daughter back. Arthur stepped in. Elena, we're not judging you. We want to understand what the best situation is for Lily. She's been through a lot of trauma. She's finally stabilizing here. You want to keep her, don't you? Eleanor interrupted, not with anger, but with deep sadness. You can give her everything I can never give her. Catherine held Eleanor's hands across the table. It's not about money or material things. It's about stability, security, and love. Lily needs all of those elements. And you think I can't give love to my own daughter? Of course you can, Arthur said quickly, but maybe we can find a solution that's good for everyone. A way for Lily to have her biological mother's love and also the stability of a structured home. Elena wiped a tear that streamed down her face. Are you talking about shared custody? We're talking about extended family, Catherine replied. You are Lily's mom. You always will be. But we can be, I don't know, aunt and uncle figures? People who help take care of her. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the phone ringing. Arthur answered and immediately recognized Thomas's voice, which seemed agitated. Arthur, I need you all to leave that house now. What? Why? I just got a call from a contact at the federal agent's office. Charles Harrison made some moves last night. He hired a New York City law firm specializing in child and family law. Is that good or bad? Very bad. They're going to try to remove Lily from your home, claiming she's in an irregular situation. They'll argue that neither you have legal guardianship nor Elena has adequate means of care. Arthur felt his stomach churn. And they can do that? Technically, yes. Lily has been living with you without official authorization for almost a month. That could be characterized as non-violent abduction or improper appropriation of a minor. But we saved her from the streets. I know, Arthur, but Charles has the resources to hire the best lawyers in the country. They'll argue that you removed a child from the official system without following the correct procedures. Catherine, who had overheard the conversation, took the phone from Arthur's hands. Thomas, what happens if they manage to remove Lily from our home? She'll be temporarily placed in an institution while the case is resolved in court. It could take months or years. The prospect of Lily going back to a shelter, especially after everything she had suffered, was unacceptable to everyone. Elena abruptly stood up from the table. I won't let that happen. I'm taking Lily with me to Portland today. Elena, wait, Arthur said. Fleeing won't solve anything. It will only confirm their allegations that Lily is in an irregular situation. Then what do you suggest? Thomas, still on the phone, offered an alternative. There's a possibility. You can request an emergency protective order, arguing that Lily is in danger if she's removed from a stable environment, but for that, you need evidence that she is well adjusted and that removal would be detrimental. What kind of evidence? Catherine asked. Medical, psychological, educational reports. Witnesses who can attest to her well-being with you, and above all, you need to formalize some type of legal arrangement that recognizes both Elena's rights and the current care situation. Arthur looked at Elena and Catherine. This means we have to make a decision now, all of us. What kind of decision? If we're going to officially fight to keep Lily safe, regardless of the cost or legal consequences. Elena took a deep breath, looking towards the room where her daughter was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. If you're willing to face this for her, so am I. Even if it means shared legal custody, even if Lily continues to live primarily here, if it's what's best for her, yes. Catherine hugged Elena, and for the first time since they met, the two women felt united by something bigger than their individual fears and insecurities. Thomas, still on the phone, gave a final warning. "You need to understand that by making this decision, you're declaring war against one of the most powerful men in the region. Charles won't give up easily." "Then let him come," Arthur responded. "Lily taught me that sometimes it's worth risking everything to do the right thing." At that moment, none of them knew that Charles had already put a plan in motion that would test not only their legal determination, but also their ability to physically protect the child they had all learned to love. Monday morning brought a discovery that would change everything again. Catherine woke up feeling strange, with a nausea she initially attributed to the stress of the past few days. But when the feeling persisted during breakfast, a suspicion began to form in her mind. A suspicion that left her simultaneously hopeful and terrified. Elena had decided to spend a few more days in Springfield to resolve the legal issues related to Lily and the property. She had slept on the living room couch, insisting that she didn't want to interfere with the routine Lily had established in the Caldwells' home. The girl, in turn, seemed to be adapting well to her biological mother's presence, naturally dividing her attention between Elena and Catherine. "Miss Catherine, are you okay?" Lily asked, noticing that Catherine had rushed to the bathroom during breakfast. "I'm fine, my dear. Just a little nauseous." Arthur watched his wife with concern. In the last 3 years since Ethan's loss, Catherine had developed some health problems related to stress and depression. He feared that the tension of recent events was affecting her physical health. "Catherine, you should go to the doctor," he suggested. "Maybe it's a good idea," she agreed, but there was something in her tone that Arthur couldn't identify. At 9 in the morning, Thomas arrived at the house with urgent news. His expression was grave, and he carried a briefcase full of official documents. "Charles moved faster than we expected," he announced, sitting at the kitchen table. "His lawyers filed a court order last night. You have until Thursday to present a formal defense, otherwise Lily will be removed from your home." Eleanor turned pale. "Removed to where?" "To a temporary shelter in Fairview, while the case is reviewed by the juvenile court." "That cannot happen," Arthur said firmly. "Lily has suffered enough in shelters." "I agree, but we need to act fast. There are some things I discovered about the case that might help us." Thomas opened his briefcase and spread several documents on the table. "First, I managed to access the records of the shelter where Lily was before she ran away. There is extensive documentation of neglect and mistreatment, including medical reports that prove the injuries she sustained." "Is that good for our case?" Elena asked. "Very good. It shows that removing Lily from a stable environment to put her back in the system would be detrimental to her. Second, I discovered something about the Harrison family that might be useful." Thomas pulled out an old birth certificate. Charles Harrison had a son who died at 4 years old in an accident. Since then, he developed an obsession with controlling situations involving children in his area of influence. "How does that help us?" "Because I can argue that his motivation to remove Lily is not child protection, but personal control and financial interest in the property she inherited." Lily, who had been playing quietly in the corner of the kitchen, approached the table. "Mr. Thomas, does the bad man want to take me away?" Thomas knelt to be at the girl's level. "Some bad people want to take you away, yes, but we're going to fight for you to stay with the people who love you." "What if they manage to take me?" "They won't," Arthur said, picking Lily up. "We promise you'll always be safe." Catherine observed the interaction with a heavy heart. Over the past few weeks, she had become completely accustomed to Lily's presence in the house. The girl had filled a void in her life that she hadn't even known existed. The possibility of losing her was almost as painful as losing Ethan had been. "Thomas, what's our best strategy?" Catherine asked. "Multi-pronged approach. First, we'll formalize a shared custody arrangement between Elena and you. Second, we'll extensively document Lily's well-being here. Third, we'll publicly expose Charles's real motivation." "Publicly expose how?" "The local press is interested in the story. An orphan girl who discovered documents exposing municipal corruption. A powerful businessman trying to silence a 4-year-old child. That's front-page news." Elena spoke up. "But exposing Lily in the press, won't that be harmful to her?" "It might be our only protection. Charles has the power to manipulate the local judicial system, but he'll have difficulty acting against a child who is under national public attention." That afternoon, while Thomas worked on the legal documentation, Catherine went to the doctor to check on her health. Dr. Robert Peterson was the family doctor for over 10 years and knew Catherine's history with depression and loss well. "Catherine, the symptoms you described, when was your last period?" The question caught her off guard. With all the stress and changes lately, she hadn't even paid attention to her menstrual cycle. "Doctor, it's been almost 2 months, but I thought it was because of the stress. Let's do some tests, to be sure." An hour later, Catherine left the clinic in shock. She was pregnant. After 3 years of trying to get pregnant without success, after multiple fertility treatments that didn't work, she was naturally expecting a baby. When she got home, she found a scene that made her smile despite all the confusion in her mind. Lily was teaching Elena to water the plants in the backyard, carefully explaining how her Ms. Catherine had taught her to care for flowers. "Mommy, Elena, you have to put on a little water," Lily said seriously. "If you put too much water, the plant gets sick." "I understand, my princess. And where did you learn that?" "From Miss Catherine. She knows how to take care of everything that grows." The conversation deeply touched Catherine. Lily had naturally found a way to include both her biological mother and her adoptive family in her life, creating different titles for each without diminishing the love she felt for any of them. "Arthur," Catherine called when she found him in the living room reading legal documents. "I need to tell you something." "What did the doctor say? Is everything okay?" "I'm pregnant." Arthur let the papers fall to the floor, looking at his wife in disbelief. "What?" 2 months along. Apparently it happened right when Lily arrived at our house." The moment was simultaneously joyous and complicated. Arthur hugged Catherine tightly, tears in his eyes at the news they had waited for so long, but both knew that the pregnancy made Lily's situation even more complex. "Catherine, this changes everything, or it changes nothing. I don't know." "I know one thing it doesn't change," she replied. "It doesn't change how much we love Lily or how much we want to protect her. But it might change the legal decision. A judge might argue that with a baby on the way, you won't have the adequate means to care for Lily too. Or they might argue the opposite, that we are a stable family that is growing and has enough love for all children." That night, Catherine told Elena and Lily the news of the pregnancy. The girls' reaction was pure joy. "There's going to be a baby in the house," Lily shouted, jumping with excitement. "I can teach him to water the plants." Elena smiled, but Catherine could see the worry in her eyes. "Catherine, are you sure you want to continue with shared custody? With a baby on the way, perhaps it would be better if I took Lily to Portland." "Elena, this house is big enough for all of us, and Lily needs stability now, not another traumatic change." "But what if the judge decides you can't take care of 2 children? Then we fight that decision, together." The conversation was interrupted by the phone ringing. It was Thomas, and his voice was filled with urgency. "Arthur, Charles just made a desperate move. He offered Elena $500,000 to give up any rights to the property and take Lily away from Springfield immediately. $500,000, Arthur repeated, looking at Eleanor. That's a lot of money, Eleanor whispered, clearly shaken by the offer. It's more money than I would see in a lifetime of work. At that moment, everyone realized they were facing not only a legal battle, but also an attempt at corruption that would test their fundamental values and their determination to do what was right for Lily, regardless of the personal price. The proposal of $500,000 hung over the Caldwell's house like a heavy cloud. Throughout Tuesday night, Elena barely slept, tossing and turning constantly on the living room couch as she mentally calculated what that amount could mean for her and Lily's lives. It was more money than she could save in 20 years working as a cleaner. The next morning, she woke up with swollen eyes and a decision weighing on her heart. During breakfast, she watched Lily animatedly chatting with Catherine about the baby growing in Ms. Catherine's belly, asking innocent questions about when it would be born and whether it would be a boy or a girl. Miss Catherine, when the baby is born, will he play with me? Lily asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. Of course he will, my dear. You'll be like an older sister to him. An older sister, Lily repeated, as if trying out the concept. I've never been an older sister. Elena felt her heart break a little more. Her daughter was clearly happy and settled in this environment, something she, with her financial limitations, might never be able to provide. But Charles's offer could change everything. With $500,000, she could buy a small house, ensure Lily's education, give her a dignified life. Arthur, Eleanor said when they were alone in the kitchen, I need to be honest about something. That amount, it's more money than I can even imagine. Eleanor, are you thinking of accepting? I'm thinking about Lily. With that money, I could give her everything you're giving her, education, security, opportunities. But you'd be taking her from an environment where she is loved and happy, and taking her to live with her biological mother who also loves her. Arthur realized Elena was genuinely torn between what her heart wanted and what her mind calculated to be best for Lily. Elena, may I ask you a question? If there were no money involved, if it were just a decision about where Lily would be happiest, what would be your choice? Elena lowered her eyes, fighting back tears. She would be happier here. You can give her stability, education, a structured family. I know that. Then why are you considering the offer? Because I'm her mother. Because I spent 2 years looking for my daughter, working day and night to find her. Because when I saw her for the first time in 2 years, I thought I could finally be a real mother again. The pain in Elena's voice was palpable. Arthur understood that she was facing an impossible dilemma, choosing between being a good mother by staying with her daughter or being a good mother by giving her up for her well-being. At that moment, Thomas arrived at the house with news that would further complicate the situation. His expression was grim, and he carried a briefcase full of new documents. We have a problem, he announced. Charles isn't just offering money, he's making veiled threats. What kind of threats? Arthur asked. Last night, 3 city inspectors showed up at your construction company, alleging irregularities in the permits for ongoing work. Coincidentally, all the projects being questioned are on downtown properties. He's sabotaging my company. It seems so. And there's more. Elena, the hospital where you work in Portland, received an anonymous tip alleging that you abandoned a minor daughter and could pose a risk to patient safety. Elena turned pale. They can fire me because of that? They can investigate. And even if they find nothing, your professional reputation will be damaged. Charles's strategy was becoming clear: to pressure everyone involved simultaneously, offering an easy, way out through money, or creating enough problems to force a capitulation. Thomas, Arthur said, what's our actual legal situation right now? Complex. You have until Thursday to present a formal defense against Lily's removal. I have medical and psychological documentation proving she's well adjusted here, but the judge might rule that the irregular situation is detrimental regardless of her current well-being. And if Elena accepts Charles's offer? Then the whole case disappears. Lily leaves with her biological mother, the property stays in Charles's hands, and everyone can pretend nothing happened. Catherine, who had been listening to the conversation from the kitchen door, finally spoke. Except Lily will grow up knowing she was sold for $500,000. It's not quite like that, Elena protested, but her voice didn't sound convincing even to herself. At that moment, Lily ran into the kitchen, interrupting the adults' tense conversation. She held a drawing she had just made, a large family with two women who clearly represented Catherine and Elena, a man who was Arthur herself, and a small figure that must have been the baby yet to be born. "Look what I drew," she said excitedly. "Our whole family together." The drawing deeply touched everyone present. Lily had naturally created a vision of family that included all the people she loved without exclusions or conflicts. It was a childlike wisdom that the adults were struggling to comprehend. "Lily," Elena said, kneeling beside her daughter, "would you like to come live with Mom in Portland? We could have our own little house, just the two of us." Lily looked at her biological mother with confusion. "But why just the two of us? Can't it be everyone together?" "Sometimes it can't be everyone together, my dear." "Why?" Lily's simple question exposed the artificiality of the situation. There was no natural reason to separate a family that was functioning well. The only reason was the external pressure from Charles and the financial limitations that the social system had created. "Lily," Arthur said, sitting on the floor to be at the girl's level, "if you could choose anything in the world, where would you like to live?" Lily thought for a moment, with the seriousness she had developed for important matters. "I want to live where everyone who loves me can be together. Here, with you, with Mommy Elena, and with the baby when he's born." And what if that wasn't possible? Why wouldn't it be possible? Lily's question left all the adults speechless. Indeed, why wasn't it possible? Besides external pressures and social conventions about traditional family structures, there was no real impediment for this unconventional family to continue functioning. "Elena," Catherine said softly, "what if we didn't accept Charles's money, and you stayed here in Springfield? I can help you find work. You can live with us until you get settled. Would you do that? For Lily, we'll do anything." Thomas, who had observed the entire interaction, smiled for the first time in days. "This might be exactly what we need to win the case, an extended family, with the biological mother present and participating in a stable and loving environment." "But what about Charles's threats?" Arthur asked. "Charles is betting that you'll back down out of fear or financial interest. If we hold our ground and make the entire situation public, he'll have difficulty continuing to pressure." "Make it public how?" "Tomorrow morning we'll hold a press conference. Elena, Lily, both of you, and all the documentation that proves both the corruption in the property case and Lily's well-being with you." The prospect of public exposure made everyone nervous, especially Elena, who wasn't accustomed to media attention. But when they looked at Lily, still holding her drawing of the extended family, they realized they had no choice. "All right," Elena said finally. "We'll fight, all of us together." At that moment, none of them knew that Charles had already become aware of their decision through contacts and was planning a final move that would put Lily in real physical danger. Thursday morning's press conference was scheduled for 10 o'clock at the Springfield City Hall auditorium. Thomas had contacted journalists from 3 regional television stations, 2 local newspapers, and an investigative magazine from Portland. The strategy was simple: make the case public before Charles could use his influence to silence the family. That morning, Arthur woke up to an unexpected call. It was Mark, his construction engineer, and his voice was filled with concern. "Arthur, something serious happened overnight." "What was it?" "Someone broke into the construction site on Elm Street and damaged the entire structure we had erected. It wasn't common vandalism, it was systematic sabotage." Arthur felt his stomach churn. The Elm Street project was one of his construction company's most important ventures, a residential building that represented almost 2 years of work and investment. How much damage? At least $300,000. And worse, we found evidence that someone was trying to make the structure collapse in a way that would look like an engineering accident. The implication was terrifying. If the structure had collapsed during working hours, it could have resulted in serious injuries or even deaths. Charles wasn't just pressuring them financially, he was creating situations of real danger. "Mark, halt all work immediately. I don't want anyone working anywhere until we resolve this." When Arthur told Catherine, Elena, and Lily about the sabotage, the atmosphere in the house became visibly tense. Lily noticed the change in the adult's mood and approached Catherine with concern. "Miss Catherine, why is everyone sad?" "Some bad men are trying to do bad things to scare us, my dear. Like Miss Jenkins used to do at the shelter." Lily's innocent comparison was painfully accurate. Just like at the shelter, she was once again in a situation where powerful adults used fear and intimidation to control situations. "Something like that," Catherine admitted. "But this time you have people who will protect you." Thomas arrived an hour before the press conference, with news that again changed the dynamic of the situation. His expression was graver than ever. "I received a call from the federal agent responsible for the corruption investigation at City Hall," he announced. "Victor Price has agreed to a cooperating witness agreement." "Is that good or bad?" Elena asked. "Very good for the corruption case, very dangerous for your safety. Victor is revealing details of a scheme that goes far beyond Springfield." "What do you mean?" "Charles wasn't acting alone. He was part of a network operating in at least 10 cities in northern Illinois, illegally appropriating properties from vulnerable families. The total value of the stolen land exceeds $100 million. Arthur nodded slowly. "And now that Victor is talking, Charles has become the primary target of the federal investigation. He's desperate, and desperate people with so much power and money can be very dangerous." "Thomas, do you think we should cancel the press conference?" "On the contrary, I think the press conference is our protection. Once the story is public, it will be very difficult for Charles to act against you without attracting attention." At City Hall Auditorium, a small crowd had gathered. In addition to journalists, there were curious onlookers, city employees, and some people Thomas identified as being connected to Charles. The presence of the latter made everyone nervous. Arthur sat at the main table with Elena beside him, Lily on Catherine's lap, and Thomas coordinating the presentation. Piles of documents were organized on the table. The deeds Lily found, medical reports, shelter records, and all the documentation proving both the corruption and the girl's well-being. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Thomas began, "we are here today to expose a case involving municipal corruption, illegal appropriation of properties, and above all, the future of a 4-year-old child who inadvertently became a central piece in this investigation." Journalists began asking questions, and gradually the full story unfolded. Arthur told about the accident on the property and how he met Lily. Elena spoke about her 2 years searching for her daughter and the difficulties she faced in the bureaucratic system. Thomas presented the evidence of corruption and explained how the individual case had exposed a much larger network of crimes. When it was Lily's turn to speak, Thomas had prepared only a few simple questions, but the girl, with her natural honesty, ended up offering the most powerful testimony of all. Lily, can you tell people how you found the papers that are helping to uncover the bad things that happened? I was playing in Miss Catherine's backyard and saw that the dirt was different near the flowers. I dug and found a briefcase with Grandpa Joe's papers. And do you remember your grandpa? Yes, I do. He was very kind, but he got sick, and the bad man came to his house to make him sad. What bad man? The man who came to our house the other day, the one who talked loud and made Grandpa Joe cry. Lily's simplicity and sincerity visibly impacted the journalists present. Here was a 4-year-old child describing witnesses of intimidation and corruption more clearly than many adults could. Lily, are you happy living with Mr. Arthur and Miss Catherine? I'm very happy. They give me food, they let me play in the backyard, and now Mommy Elena is here too, and there's going to be a baby in the house. The mention of the baby created a moment of tenderness that thoroughly humanized the story. The journalists could see that it wasn't just about abstract legal issues, but about a real family that was being threatened. The interview was ending when there was a commotion at the entrance of City Hall Auditorium. Charles Harrison had arrived with 2 lawyers and was demanding an immediate right of reply. This child is being manipulated by people who want to defame my reputation, Charles declared to the journalists, his voice filled with feigned indignation. I am a respected businessman who has always acted within the law. Mr. Harrison, one of the journalists asked, how do you explain the documents proving that properties were acquired for prices far below market value through intimidation? Documents can be forged. A sick man, desperate for money, could have made up any story to try to invalidate a legal sale. Thomas stood up, holding a new file he had brought specifically for this possibility. Mr. Harrison, are you willing to explain these bank transfers that show irregular payments to public officials during the same periods as the land acquisitions? The question caught Charles off guard. He quickly looked at his lawyers, clearly not expecting financial evidence to be presented publicly. I'm not obligated to respond to unfounded accusations based on documents of dubious origin. Documents provided by the federal agents during the official investigation, Thomas clarified. Mr. Harrison, can you explain why you offered Lily's mother $500,000 to drop any claim to the property? The revelation of the attempted bribe caused an uproar among the journalists. Charles realized he had fallen into a trap. His attempt to appear publicly to control the narrative had turned into an exposé of his corrupt practices. This interview is over, he said abruptly, turning to leave. But as he passed the table, where the family was, he stopped and looked directly at Lily. Girl, you don't know what you've just done, neither do your protectors. The veiled threat, made directly to a 4-year-old child in front of television cameras, was Charles's final mistake. The journalists captured everything, and his public reputation was irremediably damaged. But while the family celebrated the success of the press conference, Charles was outside City Hall Auditorium, making a call that would put Lily in immediate physical danger. Thursday afternoon passed with a false sense of normalcy at the Caldwell's home. The television interviews had aired on the midday news, and the phone hadn't stopped ringing, with calls of support from neighbors, Arthur's colleagues, and even strangers who had sympathized with the family's situation. Lily played in the backyard with Elena, who had definitively decided to stay in Springfield to be near her daughter. The 2 planted sunflower seedlings that Catherine had bought that morning, an activity that symbolized hope for a stable future for all of them. Mommy Elena, when the sunflowers grow, will they be very tall? Lily asked, carefully placing soil around a seed. Yes, they will, my princess. Some get as tall as Mr. Arthur. And will they stay here forever? If we take good care of them, yes. The conversation had layers of meaning that only the adults fully understood. Lily was learning about permanence and care through the plants, concepts she had lost during her months on the streets. Inside the house, Arthur received a call from Dr. Robert Peterson, his doctor, who had also watched the interview on television. "Arthur, I need to congratulate you all for your courage, but as a doctor and friend, I need to warn you about something." "What is it, doctor?" "I've known Charles Harrison for many years. He was once my patient, and I can tell you he's a man with serious problems of control and obsession. When he doesn't get what he wants through conventional means, he resorts to unconventional means?" "Exactly. Arthur, I recommend you all be very careful in the coming weeks. A man like Charles, with so much money and power, when he feels cornered." The call was interrupted by the sound of glass breaking in the backyard. Arthur ran to the window and saw that a rock had been thrown through the kitchen window. Elena was shielding Lily with her body, looking nervously at the tall fences that surrounded the property. "Catherine!" Arthur yelled. "Call the police!" But before she could grab the phone, 3 men jumped over the back fence. They weren't ordinary men. They wore dark clothes, their faces covered by masks, and they moved with the precision of someone who had carefully planned the invasion. "Elena, bring Lily inside now!" Arthur yelled, running to the back door. Elena picked up Lily and ran towards the house, but one of the intruders managed to position himself between them and the entrance. Lily started crying, terrified by the situation that echoed her worst nightmares from her time on the streets. "Please don't hurt my daughter," Eleanor screamed, hugging Lily tightly. "No one will be hurt if you cooperate," said one of the men, his voice muffled by the mask. "We just want the child." "Never!" Arthur had reached the back door, holding a baseball bat he kept in the laundry room closet. "Mr. Caldwell, you won't want to do anything rash in front of the girl." The implicit threat was clear. They knew exactly who they were and had planned the invasion knowing the family's routine. They weren't common criminals. They were professionals specifically hired for that operation. Catherine appeared at the kitchen door with the phone in her hands. "The police are coming!" "There won't be time," one of the intruders replied calmly. "We know exactly how much time we have." In that critical moment, Lily did something that surprised everyone. She stopped crying abruptly and looked directly at the man who seemed to be the leader. "Do you work for the bad man who made Grandpa Joe cry?" The childlike question momentarily disarmed the intruders. They clearly didn't expect a 4-year-old to be so direct. "Girl, we just want to take you to a safe place." "Liar," Lily said with surprising firmness. "A safe place is here with my family." It was at that moment that Thomas arrived for a routine visit, parking his car in front of the house. When he saw the situation in the backyard through the open window, he immediately called the federal agents, who had given him a direct number for emergencies related to the case. "Agent Davis, Thomas Miller, there's an invasion in progress at the Caldwell's house. Masked men trying to kidnap Lily." The response was immediate. "Units are en route. Do not enter the house. Maintain visual distance." But Thomas couldn't just wait while a 4-year-old child was being threatened. He discreetly went around the house and entered through the front door, which was unlocked. In the backyard, the tension had escalated. One of the intruders had moved closer to Elena and Lily, while the other 2 kept Arthur at a distance. "Ma'am, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The choice is yours." "The choice is mine," a strong voice echoed from the kitchen door. Everyone turned to see Thomas standing in the doorway, holding his cell phone in one hand and gesturing with the other. "This phone is recording everything and transmitting directly to the federal agents. You have approximately 2 minutes before this place is surrounded by federal agents." "You're bluffing," said the leader of the intruders, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Want to bet your freedom on that?" At that moment, The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, confirming that Thomas wasn't bluffing. The three intruders exchanged glances, clearly unprepared to face federal authorities. "This isn't over," the leader said, retreating towards the fence. "The girl can't escape forever." "You bet she can," Arthur responded, still holding the baseball bat. The intruders jumped over the fence again and disappeared down the back street, seconds before the first federal agent vehicle arrived at the house. When the agents entered the backyard, they found a traumatized but intact family. Lily was hugging Elena and Catherine simultaneously, trembling but trying to be brave. "Mr. Thomas, did the bad men leave?" "Yes, my little warrior." Agent Davis, a tall, serious man who had coordinated the investigation into Charles since the beginning, quickly surveyed the scene and then turned to Thomas. "How did you know this was going to happen?" "We didn't know. It was luck I arrived at the right time." "It wasn't luck," Agent Davis said grimly. "It was planning. These men knew your routine exactly. They knew where everyone would be. They knew how much time they'd have. Someone was informing them." The implication was terrifying. Charles had not only hired professionals to kidnap Lily, he had access to detailed information about the family's life. "Agent Davis, does this mean we're not safe here?" Catherine asked, a protective hand over her belly where the baby was growing. "It means Charles is desperate enough to commit violent crimes, and a desperate man with resources is dangerous. What do you recommend?" 24-hour police protection and serious consideration for temporary relocation." Arthur looked at his family: pregnant Catherine, traumatized but brave Lily, Elena determined to protect her daughter at all costs. They had faced so much together, but now they were dealing with threats that went beyond anything they had imagined. "We're not running," he said finally. "We're not going to give Charles the pleasure of seeing us run, but I accept the police protection." That night, while two federal agents stood guard at the house, the family gathered in the living room to process the day's events. Lily had asked to sleep in Catherine and Arthur's room, and no one had the heart to refuse. "Mr. Arthur," she said as she settled down to sleep, "why does the bad man want to take me away?" "Because you know important things that can help catch bad people. And if I forget those things, will he leave me alone?" The question broke Arthur's heart. Lily was offering to forget her traumatic memories if it kept her safe with the family she loved. "Lily, you don't have to forget anything. We will always take care of you. Promise?" "I promise." But while Arthur made that promise, across town Charles was making even more desperate plans that would test that promise beyond any imaginable limit. Friday morning brought a revelation that would completely change the course of the entire investigation. Victor Price, in his federal holding cell, had spent the entire night revealing details of the corruption scheme that went far beyond what anyone imagined. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Agent Davis arrived at the Caldwell's house with news that would shock everyone. "We need to talk urgently," he said, entering the house where the family was still having breakfast under police protection. Victor revealed something about Lily that changes everything. Thomas, who had slept at the house to ensure additional security, joined the conversation. "What kind of revelation?" Agent Davis looked at Lily, who was quietly eating her pancakes, and then addressed the adults. "Can we talk in private first?" They gathered in Arthur's office, leaving Lily to finish breakfast under the supervision of one of the agents. What Davis had to reveal was so disturbing that he needed to consult his notes multiple times. Victor confessed that Lily's placement in the shelter wasn't accidental. Charles had identified the Rodriguez family as an obstacle to his urban expansion plans over 3 years ago. "What do you mean?" Elena asked, turning pale. Charles discovered that Joseph Rodriguez owned a strategic property for the urban development project he was planning. But he also discovered that Joseph had a daughter in Portland and a small granddaughter. And that mattered because Charles developed a strategy to pressure the family through the child. He orchestrated situations to force Elena to temporarily leave Lily at the shelter, then used contacts in local bureaucracy to hinder the reunification process. Elena covered her face with her hands. Are you saying my separation from Lily was planned by him? Not only planned, but intentionally sustained. Charles knew that with the child away, Joseph would be more vulnerable to pressure to sell the property. The revelation was devastating. Lily had not just been a victim of circumstances. She had been a pawn in a cruel and calculated manipulation that had lasted years. There's more, Agent Davis continued. Victor revealed that Charles has a history of using children as leverage in his real estate dealings. At least 4 other families were pressured through threats or manipulation involving minors. That's monstrous, Catherine murmured. It's criminal, Thomas corrected. This transforms Charles from a financial corrupter into a predator who systematically attacked families through their children. But there's a positive consequence in all this, Agent Davis said. With these revelations, Charles is no longer just a defendant in a corruption case. He now faces federal charges of kidnapping, child coercion, and racketeering with child endangerment charges. What does this mean for our situation? It means you're no longer just fighting for Lily's custody. You're protecting a crucial victim in a federal case of crimes against children. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of Lily calling from the kitchen. Mr. Arthur, there's a lady at the door. Everyone left the office to find Lily talking through the window with an elderly woman who was outside the gate. It was Mrs. Evans, a 78-year-old neighbor who lived 3 houses down and had known the family for years. Arthur, Mrs. Evans said when he opened the gate, I need to tell you something important. I saw your interview on television yesterday and remembered something. What was it, Mrs. Evans? About 3 years ago, when that little girl was still tiny, some men in suits came to my house asking about the Rodriguez family. They wanted to know where Joseph's daughter lived, if she visited him often, schedules and routines. Elena froze. What kind of men? They said they were from the government, but they didn't show identification. At the time I thought it was strange, but I didn't do anything. Now, seeing everything that's happened, Agent Davis approached. Mrs. Evans, would you be able to describe these men? One of them was older, with very white hair, wore an expensive suit. The other was younger, thin, wore glasses. The description matched Charles and Michael, his attorney, exactly. It was further evidence that the intimidation scheme had started much earlier than anyone imagined. Mrs. Evans, Thomas said, would you be willing to give a formal statement about this? If it helps this family and this girl, of course. While the adults organized Mrs. Evans' statement, Lily played in the backyard under police supervision. She had set up a small clinic with her dolls, where she treated imaginary patients. It was her way of processing all the stress and trauma of the past few days. Dr. Beery, she said to her favorite teddy bear, what do I do when I'm scared? She changed her voice to reply as the bear. You stay close to the people who love you and tell them when you're scared. The game touched Catherine, who watched from the window. Lily was developing healthy mechanisms to cope with difficult situations, something that showed her extraordinary emotional resilience. In the afternoon, news arrived that no one expected. Dr. Robert Peterson called Arthur with medical information that would change everyone's perspective on Charles. Arthur, you said you needed to understand Charles's psychological motivation to predict his next actions, right? Right. Well, as his former doctor, I can give you some information that might explain his obsession with controlling situations involving children. What information? Charles had a son who died at 4 years old in an accident, coincidentally the same age as Lily. The revelation created a terrible understanding about Charles's motivation. His obsession with controlling Lily might have deep psychological roots related to the loss of his own son. Doctor, does that make him more or less dangerous? Much more dangerous. A grief-stricken man who sees a child the same age as his deceased son can develop extremely dangerous fixations. When Arthur shared this information with the rest of the family, everyone understood that they were dealing with something much more complex than simple greed or corruption. Charles had personalized his obsession with Lily in a way that went far beyond financial interests. That explains why he doesn't give up, Thomas observed. For him, it's not just about money. It's about controlling a child who represents something psychologically significant. Agent Davis nodded gravely. This also means that rational negotiation might be impossible. Men who act on disturbed psychological motivations don't respond to conventional logic. That night, while the family had dinner under police protection, Lily made an observation that showed her intuitive understanding of the situation. Mr. Arthur, the bad man who wants to take me away, did he lose a little girl too? The question surprised everyone. Why do you think that, Lily? Because he looks at me the same way I looked at the other kids in the shelter when they had things I wanted but couldn't have. Lily's emotional wisdom once again impressed the adults. She had intuitively identified the nature of Charles's obsession. And do you know what I learned at the shelter about people who want things they can't have? What did you learn? That they get very mad and do very bad things. But in the end, they always lose, because good things can't really be stolen. Eleanor hugged her daughter, impressed by the emotional maturity Lily had developed through her difficult experiences. My princess, you are wiser than many adults. It's because I went through bad things, but now I have good things. That taught me the difference. That night when Lily finally fell asleep, between Catherine and Eleanor, the adults gathered to discuss the next steps. The day's revelations had changed everything, but they had also created a new urgency. Charles is cornered, Agent Davis summarized. Cornered men with resources and disturbed psychological motivations are capable of anything. So what do? Arthur asked. Prepare for his final move, because it's definitely coming. 6 months later, the yellow house Arthur had bought on the outskirts of Springfield had become a true home for a family no one could have imagined. It was a sunny Sunday morning, and Lily ran through the spacious backyard, chasing butterflies that danced among the flowers she herself had planted with Catherine and Elena. Charles's final move never came in the way they expected. 3 days after the revelations about his psychological obsession, he had tried to flee the country with fake documents but was captured at New York City airport. The escape attempt only confirmed his guilt, and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for corruption, racketeering, and crimes against vulnerable children. "Lily, come help Mommy with the baby!" Catherine called from the porch, holding Ethan, the name chosen in honor of the son they had lost, who had been born healthy 2 months earlier. The girl ran inside, her now well-kept and shiny hair bouncing in the wind. "Can I give him his bottle?" she asked, carefully washing her hands as Catherine had taught her. "Yes, you can, my dear. You are the best older sister in the world." The concept of an older sister had become central to Lily's identity. She took the responsibility very seriously, always making sure Ethan was comfortable and safe. It was as if her protective instincts, developed during her months on the streets, had found a positive purpose. Elena came from the kitchen, where she was preparing Sunday lunch, a tradition the family had developed in recent months. She now worked as an administrative assistant at Arthur's construction company, which had fully recovered from the losses caused by Charles. More importantly, she lived in a small apartment 2 blocks from the house, allowing her to be present daily in Lily's life without interfering with the established family dynamic. "How's my little prince?" Elena asked, caressing baby Ethan. "He smiled at me this morning," Lily proudly announced. "A real smile, not just gas." The observation made everyone laugh. Lily had become an expert in infant behavior, studying every reaction of Ethan with the seriousness of a small scientist. Arthur entered the living room carrying a stack of newspapers, all with reports about the case that had changed their lives. The corruption scandal in Springfield had become national news, resulting in the arrest of 12 people and the recovery of over $100 million in illegally appropriated properties. "Lily," he said, sitting next to the girl, "a very important letter arrived for you today." "For me? From whom?" "From the judge who decided about our family. Thomas had fought tirelessly in court and finally achieved a landmark decision. Lily was officially adopted by Arthur and Catherine, but with a special clause that recognized Elena as biological mother with preserved parental rights. It was an innovative legal arrangement that allowed the girl to have 2 official families. "What does the letter say?" Lily asked, still focused on feeding Ethan. "It says that you are now officially our daughter, but also remain Elena's daughter, and that Grandpa Joe's property has been returned to you." "And what am I going to do with the property?" Arthur smiled. Over the past few months, they had discussed several possibilities for the downtown property. Finally, Lily had made a decision that surprised everyone with its maturity. "Do you remember what we decided to do with it? We're going to build a house for kids who don't have families, like I was before." The project was already underway, with the money recovered through federal investigations and donations that came after the case was exposed in the media. They were building a model shelter, with specialized psychological support and a focus on family reunification. "And you still want it to be called Grandpa Joe's house?" Catherine asked. "Yes, I do. That way the other kids will know that someone who went through bad things managed to have a happy family in the end." Lily's emotional wisdom, now at 5 years old, continued to impress everyone around her. She had transformed her traumatic experience into motivation to help other children in similar situations. Dr. Robert Peterson arrived for Sunday lunch, a tradition that had developed after he retired and became a grandfather figure to Lily. He always brought small gifts, storybooks, special colored pencils, or educational toys. "How's my favorite patient?" he asked, hugging Lily. "Dr. Peterson, Ethan is growing so fast. I think he's going to be tall, like Daddy Arthur." The use of Daddy Arthur had been a natural evolution. Lily had developed specific titles for each important adult in her life: Daddy Arthur, Mommy Catherine, Mommy Elena, Uncle Thomas, and Grandpa Robert. During lunch, the conversation naturally turned to the future. Ethan was growing rapidly, Lily was preparing to enter formal school the following year, and Elena had been accepted into an accounting technician course that would allow her to grow professionally. "Lily," Thomas said, "do you remember when we first met, and you were scared of everything?" "Yes, I do. I thought all grown-ups were bad. And now? Now I know there are bad people and good people, and that good people are stronger when they stick together." The observation deeply touched everyone present. Lily had perfectly articulated the central lesson of her entire journey. After lunch, while the adults chatted in the living room, Lily took Ethan to the backyard to show him the garden that had grown since they moved into the new house. The flowers were blooming abundantly, creating a rainbow of colors that attracted butterflies and birds. "Ethan," she said to the baby, who watched everything with wide, curious eyes, "when you grow up, I'll teach you how to take care of the flowers, and I'll tell you the story of how our family found each other." "What story will you tell him?" Catherine asked, approaching silently. "I'll tell him that sometimes very bad things happen to good people, but that there's always hope, and that love can fix almost everything." And if he asks about the sad parts of the story, I'll tell those parts too, because the sad parts make us appreciate the happy parts more. That afternoon, while Ethan slept in his stroller under the shade of the fruit tree, Lily sat with her colored pencils to draw. Her drawings had evolved significantly in recent months. Now they were colorful, detailed, and always showed happy families in beautiful settings. Today's drawing showed the yellow house surrounded by flowers with 6 figures in front. Herself, Ethan, Arthur, Catherine, Elena, and a new figure she explained was all the kids from Grandpa Joe's house who will still have a family. "Lily," Arthur said, observing the drawing, "do you still remember what your life was like before we met?" "Yes, I do, but it doesn't make me sad anymore." "Why?" "Because now I know that wasn't my real life. It was just a bad part I had to go through to get to my real life, which is here with you." As the sun set, the family gathered on the porch of the yellow house to watch the day end over the mountains surrounding Springfield. Lily was on Arthur's lap. Ethan slept in Catherine's arms, and Eleanor held her daughter's hand as they talked about plans for the next week. "Daddy Arthur," Lily mumbled sleepily, "can I ask you something?" "You can ask all the questions you want. If you hadn't fallen into that hole that day, would we never have met?" "Probably not." "Then it was good that you fell into the hole." "It was the best thing that ever happened to me." "Me too." That night, when Lily fell asleep in her own bed, in her own room, in the house that was genuinely her home, she dreamt of colorful birds flying freely over a city where all children had families who loved them. Across the room, Ethan slept peacefully in his crib, protected by an older sister who had learned that true love always finds a way to flourish, even in the most difficult terrains.